Ellie, thank you so much for joining Women's Circle today.
Thank you for inviting me, Carlie.
It's so special. We're actually sitting here in the MARTA, and I'm so keen to hear your journey and share it with the world because I think it's so special. So I was wondering if you tell us where you want to start with this.
Yeah, I think really if we could start at the beginning, before this pregnancy even happened. Because the journey really for me, and I guess for many others, it's not just about the journey of pregnancy, it's the journey of finding out that you are pregnant.
Absolutely.
And for my husband and I, we went through 15 years of unexplained infertility. So we had a lot of tests, and at the end of the day, what we were told is everything works, and they could not explain why it was not resulting in pregnancy. So that was quite stressful in itself, and we were told that being given that diagnosis is the equivalent of being told you have AIDS or cancer, because there's a lot of unanswered questions that we had, and they just couldn't give us the answers. So with this pregnancy, because I also have a son, and he's now 22 months, going on 22 years, but we had decided late last year that we would like to see if we could give him a sibling. And we knew that our chances with unexplained infertility were quite low. I'd been told back in 2018 that the average couple would cumulatively have about a 20% chance of getting pregnant consistently trying month after month. With unexplained infertility, we were told we had about a 2% chance, and that did not improve month to month. So we knew that IVF was really our only option. And in November, we started the conversation with our specialist, and he'd said that realistically, my AMH levels were so low that he was not sure whether we were even going to get an egg to be able to, have that fertilized to end up with an embryo and then a pregnancy. So he basically said to us that, this cycle that we would be trying, which ended up being in March of this year, he would put me on the maximum dosage of meds, and we'd see what would happen. And by the time the cycle started in March, I started having ultrasounds to see what follicles had been developing, and I remember getting a call 2 days before they were going to take the egg from me, my egg pickup, to say, doctor believes that he's wanting to err on the side of caution, and he's given you the option, or gave me the option of cancelling the surgery because there was possibly only one egg. And at that point, I remember having so much doubt. I really wanted to progress with no regrets, and the no regrets was that we would go ahead and we would still have the surgery, but knowing full well that that one egg would possibly not be retrieved, because in every follicle there isn't necessarily an egg, from what's been explained to me, and they need to be a certain size as a follicle to have a mature enough egg to then progress with fertilisation. But what I also felt at that point was a sudden overwhelming feeling of grief, to prepare myself and really for us as a family to prepare that if we went ahead with the surgery and we could not get that egg, and that really the likelihood of that egg fertilising was small, what would it mean for us? And not to be dismissive of how thankful we are that we do have a child, but what we were hoping for as a family.
And that was a process, right?
It was
a grief process?
It was a grief process, and we were grieving before we knew what the outcome was, kind of trying to prepare ourselves. So I can remember, this is 2 days before having my egg pick up, my son had trouble breathing, and I had to call an ambulance. I remember saying to the ambo, I can look back on it now and I smile, but at the time I was not smiling. I remember saying to the paramedic, do you mind if I put my trigger needle in the fridge of the ambulance? Because I need to do my trigger needle at 8 o'clock, and it was 7 o'clock. So I did that trigger needle in the public toilets at our local public hospital.
Can you tell us what a trigger needle is?
Yeah. Trigger needle is, from what I understand, whereby it's a subcutaneous needle, so it doesn't go like very deep at all into your tummy, but you need to inject it very close to what for me was virtually in the middle of my tummy, below my belly button, so that it would trigger my ovaries to get ready to release the follicle in 36 hours. So 36, because I had that at 8 o'clock at night, and then on the Wednesday, so 2 days later, 8 o'clock in the morning, I was the first on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, so there I am.
Public toilets.
Public toilets at the hospital. My husband's looking after our son who's going to be admitted, and so there's all that extra stress, and then I'm injecting myself in the public toilets.
Gosh.
Not ideal, but, you know, the things that you do
Absolutely.
to get through. So Wednesday morning, I was in surgery. I remember the doctor saying to me, I'll try my very best to get an egg for you, but if that doesn't happen, I'm really sorry. And so again, going into the theatre with such mixed emotions of wanting to be cautiously optimistic, but needing to be a realist that there may be nothing there. That afternoon, I was told that we had an egg, and every day that went past, we were given other lines of decisions to make. Mm-hmm. So typically the egg gets put in a dish with the sperm and it naturally fertilizes. So I know sometimes people will ask me questions and say, did you plan this pregnancy? Yes, we did. Was it natural? Yes, it was, because there's nothing scientifically they did to make, you know, anything any different to the fertilization process. And I'm very strong about that regardless of how a child is conceived, it's still a very natural desire and a natural birth, a natural pregnancy. So we were told on day 2, and I say day 2 because typically an embryo, once it has fertilized, you then watch its development over the next 5 days. And it's typically transferred on day 3 or day 5. We were given the option, and the option was if we transferred on day 3, provided that the embryo was still growing and developing, that, you know, we would have a 33% chance that I could fall pregnant. If we waited till day 5, we risked the embryo not making it to day 5, but we also then ended up with a 40% chance I'd be pregnant. So again, a lot of questions, and we just went with our gut. Previously, we had 5 eggs and 4 embryos, but 3 were viable. So I was looking at the previous numbers, knowing I was 2 years older and knowing it was our last effort, really. Yeah. Through some miracle, I don't even have a word to use other than miracle, we made it to day 5 and we had the transfer. Now, the transfer is, for those who may not be aware, it's a bit like having a pap smear. Essentially, my specialist used an ultrasound. So on the outside of my tummy, I had an ultrasound, and then it was like a transvaginal ultrasound as well, but instead there's a catheter that goes in. So to my right, there was the screen, and I could see the transfer happening as it took place. And it's a very beautiful moment when the specialist has the embryologist come in with the embryo, and he does this, and I get very emotional about it, but does this very, you know, welcome to the world, little one, and let's all send positive thoughts. So at that point, I saw on the screen and I took a video, said to my husband, the transfer looked significantly different to when our son was transferred. It was, you can see like a flash of light go across the screen. And with our son, it was a very quick flicker, like I wouldn't have even noticed it happened. But with this one, it was very large. And I just said to him, I wonder if maybe the embryo has split.
Wow, like
in that moment, I intuitively thought, I wonder if it's, because it was just so large and so prominent.
So the flicker that you saw,
you
had intuition.
I did. My intuition told me that it was something about it. You know, the flicker of light is when the embryo passes from the catheter into the uterus, and there was just something about the size of it and the prominence that gave me a feeling. Oh, I wonder. You know, we know that there was only one embryo, but you know, something just gave me a feeling, and so that was Easter Monday, and then by Thursday of that week, so only 3 days later, I found myself behaving really irrationally. And I said to a friend, anyone would think I'm pregnant, because I got upset that it took me 45 minutes to navigate 3 detours to get to Hungry Jack's. I really wanted a decaf latte from Hungry Jack's. And then I cried because they didn't have any decaf. But that Saturday, so 5 days after transfer, again, I was feeling really agitated. And after my groceries had been delivered, in there I had requested a digital test. I did it and I slammed it on the table in front of my husband, and he said, "Why would you do this?" And then he looked at it and he went, "No, you can't be already." Because when you have the trigger, like the meds that they give you for IVF include HCG. So in his mind, he was saying, well, and he was right to say HCG is a pregnancy hormone. But I then sat down, and I had previously recorded in Excel when I'd done my pregnancy tests with our son, and I started to see a pattern. So we found out at that moment, and that was 5 days post-transfer, which is likely too early, but I remember having my bloods another week and a half later, and the clinic saying, "Oh, Ellie, you're very much pregnant." And again, I went, they're twins. There has to be 2 babies in there to be very much pregnant.
Wow. So just that intuition, like, was there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And emotional. And, like, so I'd be interested to know, like, you kind of said that you started a grieving process before this.
Yeah.
So when it was actually like, no, you're pregnant, how did that kind of sit with you? Like, did you have to reverse some of the things that have been going on?
I know for me, with both pregnancies, I've been in a state of disbelief until the babies have arrived. Because it's been, you know, like I said, 15 years of being on the journey, and then this is real. This is really happening.
Yeah.
And so the thing with the grieving, I still was erring on that side of caution, but just trying to be very balanced with how I was feeling. I mean, I had a lot of tears that day. I remember ringing my husband and telling him, yes, I'm pregnant, but still kind of being a little bit reluctant to get too excited, because also with IVF, there are, you know, I remember being quoted with our son, I had a 25% chance I'd make it to live birth. And with these, I've been given a 17% chance of getting to live birth. So there still, you know, was a significant risk of miscarriage. So it was very hard to balance that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're 2,000 kilometres from our family, so it's very hard to even, you know, articulate that conversation over the phone. It feels very impersonal. But at that point, we'd also chosen not to really share the news with anyone other than ourselves, because we didn't want to get anyone excited when we knew there was still so much risk.
So you found out you're pregnant. We're going to leave that there for a minute, because we're going to just put people on the edge of their seats. But I want to go back to, you know, this journey, the 15 years that you've been on. It hasn't just been about a baby. Like, there's so many other things that have happened to you, and you've got a really amazing and interesting life. So I'd love to go back there and maybe sort of, you know, where you've come from to then be on that journey to the decision to wanting to have children, and then that becoming a focus.
Yeah,
Can we go back?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. We can. And I remember I finished my degree. I did a social science and psych degree at Adelaide University. So I finished that 2002, and then we got married in 2003. I spent about 9 years working in recruitment and HR, learning and development and training for a variety of organisations, from, you know, state-based to global organisations. And I was very thirsty to continue to develop my career. But at the same time, I was mindful that I wanted to start a family. And I'll be honest and say I found it very conflicting because I felt like in my 20s that I still had so much to achieve, and I had set myself a goal that by the time I turned 30, bakery would be closed.
Okay.
The children would have arrived and I'd be career focused. And I remember the night before turning 30, just feeling absolute misery that I'd set myself up with a goal that I really, at that point, realised I had no control over.
Yeah.
I was very used to goal setting and planning and being very organised, and then all of a sudden this goal that I have is just not happening. But around 2016, we had moved to Melbourne from Adelaide. So I had an HR business at the time. I'd been self-employed for 4 years, and I was lecturing at the universities in vocational topics, a career coach for all different industries, and also helping business owners better manage their staff. And we moved to Melbourne, and I've always had a bit of an issue with adjustment in general. I guess 2002, as I was finishing my degree, I was hit by a car.
Wow.
And I suffered from PTSD for about 3.5 years, and I was told during my recovery that I would always need some extra support if I went through change, but adjustment, I would likely have also some adjustment disorder depending on the magnitude of the change.
Interesting.
So we moved to Melbourne in January, and I very quickly felt displaced. My HR business was going great guns, but I felt like I needed to feel like I belonged in the community as such. So on the advice of a counsellor, it was suggested that I looked at some voluntary work. And I've always volunteered through life, but I started volunteering at my local community radio station, and much to my delight and surprise, I was offered a Monday breakfast shift straight away. I'd previously done radio in 2000 for an Italian community radio station in Adelaide, and I previously studied community radio in Year 12 as a major assignment, so I guess I've always had some interest in radio and in music, but very quickly I realised the abilities I had to really map out how I wanted that breakfast show to go. And I noticed there were so many emails coming through about Australian musicians, and they weren't being played because community radio only has a requirement to play 25% of Australian music. So it's okay to play Beyonce to your heart's content as long as you're playing 25% of some Aussie music as well. So I started interviewing artists. I'd have every Monday, 8 till 9, I'd have a different artist come in, and they were Aussie based, and typically in the southeast of Melbourne. And they'd share their story and play a song, and very quickly I had been approached by a number of the guests suggesting that I could, career coach them. So with that was born my identity as Ellie D, and LEDofficial.com came into fruition, where I would blog 3 interviews with different Aussie acts per week. So some of the names would include Fundamentals and Sarah McLeod from Super Jesus, but then also, Aluka, who I now see is verified in Insta but wasn't at the time. Artists who were really, I felt, not given enough of a platform. And that was great. I started emceeing music events and attended Arias twice, once as a guest and once in the media suite. And I started to really feel like the music publicity field was where I should be. I enjoyed it a lot more than the HR work, but at the same time, HR was really what funded the ability for me to be able to do the LED stuff. Yeah. But then we moved to Bundaberg in 2018, and I lost the ability to run either of those businesses due to a lack of technology in the suburb that we'd moved to. And so we moved there in February, and by April I started to receive calls from my HR clients, and again that's what funded my music passion and the publicity business. And by August 2018 I literally had no purpose anymore.
Can we just clarify, you moved around because of your husband's
job?
Yeah,
it's because he was offered a great opportunity in Bundaberg, and you know, it's a very interesting place to also go from being the breadwinner, which I was, whilst he did his PhD and his fellowships and study, to all of a sudden he is the breadwinner. And I'm not suggesting that my career doesn't matter, but, you know, at the same time, I didn't have a career anymore. He's still very supportive of me. He wants me to have my own identity and my own career, but the general reception I've received from moving, people around me have dismissed that hunger and that passion and that drive that I've had to still do something with my life and to still use the skills that I have.
Do you think that's because of his work?
Yeah, I think the general perception is he's earning,
Because
you know, a good salary, so I can just relax.
Yeah, he's in medicine. Right?
Yeah, but it's a bizarre thought because,
like, how much of it do you think is a general perception around you, and how much do you think it's within you?
No, I believe it's the general perception. I mean, if I look back, when we lived in Adelaide, I'd go to events and people would say to me, well, I wouldn't suppose you've been to university. Or, oh, so you're a receptionist. And I'd ask them, where did you get that from? They're like, well, your husband's a doctor. Yeah, but just because it's a doctor doesn't mean that I can't have my own identity.
Yeah.
And so on moving to Bundaberg, a lot of the people around me who I'd be venting and saying, I don't understand, like, I've come here and I've lost everything. And for me, you know, that ability to financially provide meant I was fulfilling a purpose.
Yes. And control, like you've talked about how control was important to you in terms of you were organised, you had these things, and so all of a sudden it was like that area was
just pulled out from under me.
Well, what do I do? What's my role? That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did you start to find your feet?
I set up a home business baking. That didn't last too long, partly because I didn't see the reward in what I was doing. I mean, as an HR consultant, I was, you know, earning over $1,000 a day and then making biscuits. And I was lucky if I made 10 or 15 cents a biscuit. You need to make a lot of biscuits to make the money I was making in HR.
Yeah.
Where we were living had no aircon, but also as I started to do IVF, it was very difficult to manage, you know, the influx of different hormones and the side effects of the medication and then the sweltering heat. And admittedly, if you don't have a good controlled environment, again, there's that word control, dough and pastry just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I tried that. I tried applying for, you know, jobs that, not just jobs that were advertised, but even just unsolicited applications, contacting organisations. General feedback I got is that I would be bored. But I thought, well, that's my choosing. If I'm applying for a job in a particular field and I've got the skills, you know, obviously I'm aware of what my abilities are, and I'll know if I'm going to get bored, like I wouldn't have applied for that job. But I found it super frustrating. And then in 2019, I fell pregnant with our son.
Did the IVF journey start when you got to Bundaberg?
Started in November 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you previously, you're building your career, your husband was at uni while you were experiencing infertility.
Yeah.
But it wasn't taking over, like it wasn't, you still had other things.
I had other things. Yeah. Admittedly, he finished uni a week before we got married? He finished uni.
Oh,
so,
right, yeah.
But as anyone would know, with a career in medicine, like, you continue to study. So doing an intern year and then basic physician training and then choosing a specialty and doing advanced physician training. And so while he's doing all these exams and these studies and placements, and, you know, then for me it was great because I knew I had a role, and the role was to support him, not only as his wife, but also in a financial sense.
Yeah.
So we could live comfortably. And, you know, I do remember a point when I was 25, we sat at our kitchen table and all of our friends had been saying things like, you know, it's not fair you get to travel. Admittedly, if we had a conference, we'd make it a trip. We'd just add on an extra week and make it a holiday. But the thing of that jealousy that they had, and they did say they were jealous, we sat down one night and I remember we had a very frank discussion, and it was, we hope that when the day arrives that we have children, that we're in such a position we can give them everything they need and not look at others and feel like we're missing out on anything.
Yeah.
Because also we've been told about, how expensive children were and that's what we thought, well, if we could be comfortable financially, perhaps we'd be in the best position to provide for them.
I feel like you and your husband have a very conscious relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it sounds like you knew what you were going into. You've been together for a long time.
Yeah.
And that communication's really clear.
Communication for us is first and foremost. Yeah, it is.
And that's really held you throughout all these difficult periods. Like, you haven't shut down, you've been able to communicate.
No.
So when you're in Bundaberg and you're feeling lost, if that's the right word.
That is a good word.
And you're trying to find yourself, and he's kind of doing his career, and he's got probably something that's interesting. How did you find support in each other during that period?
It's a good question, and I don't know if I even have an answer for that. I mean, his work is all-consuming. I don't call it a job; it's a lifestyle, and much of it I probably kept to myself. Yeah, I did. I mean, look, in 2019, we started to build our dream home, which was a 6-month project just as a build, not to mention selections and the design and everything. And that was great because it kept me busy. But by the time 2020 came around and our son was 4 months old, I remember saying to him one night, this is not enough. I had thought to myself, again, from experiences others had shared with me, that once you become a mum, you really don't have time to think about anything else, and you don't have time to shower or to eat or to sleep. And my experience with our son was quite the opposite. I could eat, I could sleep, I could shower, I could cook, I could get on with life, and he was, my sidekick.
Yeah.
And that's when I said to my husband one night, I said, this is not enough. I'd found a notebook where I'd listed 3 projects. I called them the LED trilogy. And I said to him, I think I'm going to bring them to life now. And that was my podcast and my YouTube doco and an internet radio station. And it's amazing how, as soon as I had that realisation, I mean, that's when COVID hit, I started to see things fall into place. And my husband had said to me for at least 12 months, it's quite funny. He'll listen to this and he'll say, yeah, she's being honest about it. He used to say to me, like, if you don't need to work for financial reasons, find something that makes you happy and something you really enjoy. And I couldn't disassociate doing something I enjoyed without receiving financial reward.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that point that I realised I'm very, I'd spent so many years volunteering, even through high school, that I really am passionate about giving back. And all of a sudden I felt this pure comfortability with leading passion projects.
Beautiful. I resonate that a lot.
Yeah, I thought you would.
And I think with especially like, would you say there were expectations for you around the IVF journey, and because you've, like, an inverted commas, worked so hard for this baby, that it would be everything and it should fulfill you, and it didn't. And there's guilt perhaps with that for a little bit, like, where you're like, man, why is this not enough?
Yeah, I don't know if I felt any guilt. My expectations were that I would have a child, and that I get what you're saying, like the whole thing of we had to work really hard to get that, to bring that child into our world. But I'm not going to dismiss that anyone who goes through pregnancy also works really hard. It's just that our journey was a different journey, and in many ways it's challenged us maybe in different ways to the average person who doesn't need to do IVF.
Yeah.
I just found, for me, it was more about, I'd been told about these expectations of what will happen, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the mums group when he was 4 months old, and hearing, say, out of the 10 mums, that 9 of them were all struggling with different elements of daily life. And I remember questioning myself, why don't I have this problem? been thankful that I could get sleep and shower and food and all that stuff, but I didn't feel like I fit in.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go back after the first week. I just felt I didn't click. I didn't resonate or gel with any of them because I wasn't experiencing what they were experiencing. And I think because of my IVF journey, I've always been very sensitive to, how I deliver certain messages in friendships or messages or phone calls because I don't want to be offensive or insensitive to others. And that was another thing I was asking myself is, how do I articulate myself in such a way that I can share openly, well, my experience is different, without upsetting the mum next to me because she doesn't have what I have.
Yeah, and it becomes, I think traditionally it becomes a thing of like, oh, well, we need to all be in this trench together.
Yeah, that's right.
Otherwise, if you're getting sleep and I'm not, then, how are we going to relate? And that's about changing the conversation and actually celebrating that just like pregnancy journeys, motherhood is a complete journey of differences.
It is.
That we can celebrate and can be like, that's okay that you're not getting sleep. I am, but you know what? I'm struggling with my identity and who I am, and that I actually want more. Can I say that out loud? Yeah. Without, a backlash of like, oh, but motherhood is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And so it sounds like when you put your passion projects into action, that you're like, this is me. I am showing up as a mother, and I'm showing up as a woman in this space that makes me feel alive. Is that kind of what happened?
that is. And I know I've said it more recently, but I hadn't vocalized it at that point. I want to be a mother to my children where my kids can look up at me and go, well, mum is a woman who is strong and resilient and has the ability to do so much and yet is still that supportive person that I can go to, that I can give them the motivation and the encouragement and empower them to know that there's more to life and really to be a role model for them, that they know that they can be passionate and driven and leaders in their own right. I have felt conflicted where some close to me have said, the best thing really is for you just to be at home with the kids. And I can see how others maybe have not had that opportunity, but, the grass is always greener on the other side, and someone looking into my life might think that is, the perfect lifestyle for me would be, and I say just, because to me that's what it is. Just living at home. They go to school, then what do I do with my time? Like, I've got more to give than cook meals and wash their clothes. I want to provide that role model for them, that anything is possible.
Is that what you were modelled when you were a child?
Yeah, pretty much. When I think of my parents, they both worked really hard and managed multiple, there were different facets in their life, and, everything was, family-centric. Yeah, so that for me is, and I get that, like, I know my mum would have liked to have stayed home when she had us, and I believe within 2 months of having me, she went back to work. I'm certain that desire she has is something that she wants to pass down to me.
Yeah.
I don't have the same desire.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So like, your journey is amazing and unique and beautiful, and you've arrived at this point now where we're going to go back to the point where you were told that you were pregnant, and in your mind you're like, it's twins, but no one's confirmed anything like that. No. So at what point do you get delivered some messages?
Yeah, so 7 weeks I had my dating scan, and my husband has a video where you can hear in the background they're scanning me, and I've said, are there two? And she says, well, I haven't had a look yet. And then she says, oh, there is a second heartbeat. So that was the Friday immediately before Mother's Day. And I remember leaving that appointment thinking, wow, well, we know for certain that they're identical twins because they came from the same embryo. It's split in half. And there's only a 10% chance, I believe, of having an identical pregnancy. But what then happened after that is I spent the next 3 days practically bawling because I had the realisation that my baby was going to have to grow up very fast, because in my mind I thought I could handle having one child, having my son and then having a newborn. I could balance the attention and, now at that point I remember just being in such a state of emotion, because I'd also, when I found out I was pregnant, I remember thinking to myself, okay, so we're going to be a family with 2 children. What if I wanted a third? But be careful what you ask the universe for, because careful what you wish for. Very specific. Yeah, so that was wonderful, and still to this day I remember that with a lot of emotion.
And another theme, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but control again.
Yeah.
The universe keeps saying to you, release control.
Release control. I know, release control. And I had just launched my internet radio station, Oz Now Radio, the 1st of March. So here I am, I said I had given birth to that, and that was a very emotional. I remember I was physically sick within 5 minutes of the station going live, because I had so much built up emotion and nervousness about that. And then here I am a month later and I'm pregnant with twins, and I'm starting to think I'm going to have 3 children under the age of 2. How do I do this? And it made sense because I was incredibly tired all of the time. So I thought that was maybe because I was 2 years older, but we now know that's not the reason.
Okay, yeah. So twins, you go through the emotions about that.
Yeah.
Can you settle into it yet? Or are you still I'm not sure? Because you said until they're delivered, I don't.
Until they're delivered, yeah. Look, I think now, today, that I'm 32 weeks pregnant with the twins, I nearly said their gender, I still have moments where I'll go and because I've started to order clothes, and I'll put an item of clothing, singlets, into the basket online, and then I go, oh, hang on, there's 2 babies, so I need twice as much.
Yeah.
So I do catch myself. I'm very firm in my mind that there are 2, but I still don't feel until I see them that it's really solid in my mind.
Yeah.
I still feel so much, especially given how complicated this pregnancy has been. I feel like I'm dreaming most days.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel, again, it feels very surreal.
So with the, at what point did things get complicated, essentially?
Yeah, so 7 weeks I had my dating scan. At 10 weeks, I remember I was on the phone to a family member and I thought, oh, that does not feel right. So I had a bleed. And I was told at that point by my local obstetrician that I had a threatened miscarriage. I then spotted all the way through to 16 weeks. And with identical twins, you run the risk of developing twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. Again, that's about a 10% chance. So I'd been told that I'd be having these fortnightly scans from 16 weeks. And we had the scan at 16 weeks. I remember the sonographer saying, all the best. And that night, sitting at home, I felt very unsettled. I thought, why did he say all the best? We've got another appointment in 2 weeks. And the next day, I checked us in for flights to Port Douglas. We were going for my 40th birthday for a week. And I was at the hairdresser and I got the phone call, which was my obstetrician saying, I need to see you today. Can you come straight in? So after my hair colour and process, I went to meet her with my husband, and she told me that one of the twins basically had no measurable fluid around them, and I needed to come to Brisbane. And I remember at that point she let the gender drop. That was okay. I suspected what the gender would be, but my world kind of came crashing down because we'd planned for this trip to Port Douglas. I'd checked us in for the flights. We had our suitcases packed. I'd also booked a gender reveal trip to Adelaide the following month to share the gender with our family and friends. And
you
then
found your feet. Like,
Yeah.
you found your groove.
I found my
You were like,
groove, and
I'm here.
all of a sudden I'm being told I have to cancel everything to go for an appointment to Brisbane. So the 10th of July, we set off on the road and we drove from home to Brisbane's about 4.5 hours. And I was absolutely, I just felt so much distress and anxiety and cried a river of tears, and even my husband. And then, you know, we've got our son with us who's not really aware of what's going on. But we then met with my current obstetrician and learnt that we had stage 2 of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So that's when it got next level complicated.
So is that what? Yeah. What can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome affects identical twins who share a placenta. So they have their own bedroom, whereby bedroom I mean their own sac.
Yeah.
And there's a connection where they can pass blood to each other. And what had happened is our twin B was passing it all to twin A and not keeping any for themselves. So
True giver.
a true giver, as they start kicking now, a true giver. And that in itself, I remember sitting in the room with hubby and the obstetrician, and he said to me, he drew on the board, and I remember seeing through tears that we had an option to terminate. And I remember us saying, that's not a possibility. This is the only chance that we have. And our gut was telling us we needed to keep pushing forward.
This is 16 weeks.
This is 16 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I remember being quoted that if there was only one solution for the twin-to-twin, and that was to do surgery. It was too early to do it at 16 weeks. And he said, you know, if we can get to that point, I wanted at least 19 weeks. And he said, you know, if we can't get to that, you do run the risk of 90%, I think it was 90% of losing both. And that was because the twin that has a lot of fluid works overtime with their heart and could go into cardiac arrest. And then because they're still connected, could make the other one sick because that one would pass away, and then effectively you lose both. But there was also twin B had, well, they call it stuck twin syndrome, where that baby was essentially unable to move as such because there was no measurable fluid, like they were almost cling wrapped by their sac. And that was a horrible thought. But I'd done my biggest tip is if you're going through something like this, stay away from even forums, because I looked on Facebook and there were a lot of mums that had gone from stage 2, which is where the bladder isn't visible in the donor twin, to stage 4 or 5 within a few days, and that's where basically the twin's deceased. Somehow we made it 3 weeks.
You're in Brisbane. You're in the hospital.
Oh, so at this point, that was the 12th of July. We were staying. We then had to change all of our plans to stay locally because I was having scans twice a week, and we went to every scan, you know, with bated breath. What is it going to show on the scan?
How are you getting through the weeks?
I wasn't really.
Just,
Neither of us were.
Yeah.
We were just preparing for the worst.
Yeah.
Because I was told as well I couldn't miscarry at any point.
So your life's kind of stopped.
Everything
Right.
stopped.
Yeah.
Everything. He had to take leave from work. We had to bring family in from Adelaide to look after our son because he couldn't come to appointments because of COVID. And so we've gone from living in a really large home to a 2-bedroom apartment where we don't have any privacy, we don't have any time for ourselves, and every thought is really around what's going to happen to our babies. But, you know, we got to 19 weeks and it was at that point that I had surgery. So I had what they call fetal laser ablation. Basically, I was sedated, and while sedated, they gave me a local to my tummy, and they ultrasound and saw, you know, they knew by then which twin had the most fluid. So they put a port in my tummy, and I was awake for that. And I remember seeing, not the port going in, but I remember seeing on the screen what they could see. And they basically went in with a laser, and the doctor lasered the connection so that the twins would have their own access to blood flow. And the hope was that, then they're able to support themselves independently. But I remember signing the consent form a few days before and feeling so many emotions because the risks were, 5% brain injury, 10% ruptured membranes. There was the percentage that memory was 50% chance we would take both babies home, 70% chance we'd end up with one.
A lot of stats.
Look, I love numbers and I love stats, but I tell you, after these past few months, like I just don't look at numbers in the same way. But we also were told there was a risk that, the donor twin wouldn't make it through the surgery. But we had a scan the next day and they were both still going strong.
Wow.
So
Ellie.
at that point, I was 19 weeks and 1 day. I was discharged, no pain relief, like I really wasn't in any pain. And then we had a lockdown in Brisbane. So the 8th of August at 4 o'clock, that lockdown was lifted. And I was excited because the next day I was going to have my eyebrows waxed and my nails done, and because you could go to the shops again.
Yeah.
Well, that night, on the 8th of August, my waters broke.
Oh my goodness.
So that's when it got, again, like how many layers of complication can you have? And again, I might be smiling and sound very lighthearted about it now, but I feel like I've just cried so many tears I don't think there's anything left. And so I was admitted to hospital 20 weeks and 4 days pregnant. And as the doctors advised after she had a look inside, I said, yeah, your waters are broken. So twin A that had the extra fluid and they went through that pouch, that sac, that's the twin that had the ruptured membranes. Where twin B, who was the donor, all of a sudden had a really good amount of fluid. So the twin-to-twin had resolved, but we had this problem, and at 20 weeks and 4 days, the twins were not viable if they would be delivered. So they put, the obstetrics cannula in, and I was told I may have to have steroids, and I may deliver within 48 hours. And I remember us being in the pregnancy assessment centre. My husband looked at me. He was white like a ghost. He said, "This is like game over." And he said, "Somehow we have to cheat." And I'm like, "What do you mean we have to cheat?" He said, "We have to somehow beat the system up. We have to somehow get to viability, which is basically 24 weeks." So I was admitted, and I haven't left the hospital since.
Wow.
That was 11 and a half weeks ago.
And that's how we met. Because
That's how we met through the craft class.
Because you came to craft. And I think for me, I was just blown away by your vibrancy and like how you've gone through so many hurdles. And yeah, you've cried and you've been human because it is a journey.
It is.
But that there's a resilience within you of like, I don't have any other choice but to keep going.
Thank you.
And,
Yeah.
And these twins, this is our journey right now.
You're right. This is the journey, and I'm really baffled at, admittedly, I have read a lot of forums, I've joined a lot of groups with PPROM as the focus, which is the premature ruptured membranes, and I've made a lot of friends online overseas who have gone through similar. I'm really stumped at how I've gotten to this point. Along the way, there's been constant reassurance of, little goals. You need to get to 21 weeks, then 22, then 24. Okay, now 26, now 28. And so that has helped in some respect, but I was always counting down to 32 weeks. And I remember I started the countdown with 83 days to go, just in the notebook. And I didn't find that until about four or 5 weeks ago. And I found that and went, wow, look at where I started counting and look at where I am now. And so last night I was quite emotional, just reflecting on everything I've been through. I'm still not sure how I made it through. I mean, I know routine has been really key for me, but to constantly have these moving goalposts and, constantly this whole time, my waters have continued to, flow, for want of a better word. It's 11 weeks of wearing adult nappies and going to the bathroom, and every time I'm not sure what I'm going to see. But I'm in the best place. I mean, I didn't like hearing that for the first couple of weeks and months, where everyone would say, you're in the best place. But, well, it's easy for you to say, because you're not living in hospital and on bed rest with toilet privileges and, restricted. I'm living out of an overnight bag with 4 or 5 changes of clothes, and I can't even walk to the laundry to do my washing. So I'm very dependent on everyone around me.
The very thing you don't want to be.
No.
This is the lesson.
Control.
Would you say surrender is a word?
Oh, see, that's a word that's been said to me, and I was so against the word surrender when I was sharing how disappointed I was that I couldn't use my professional skills, and I'd be told surrender, and I'd be like, I'm just,
what does the word
cringing.
mean to you though? Like,
give up.
Surrender means give up.
To me, it's give up, and I don't give up.
Yeah.
I love a challenge, but this challenge has been, I don't feel like the challenge has been met, because even though I'm 32 weeks today, we still have that challenge of when the babies are delivered, in what condition are they going to be in?
Yes, so the journey.
And the journey continues, and then it'll be, how do we support them best in the real world? Because I have no illusion around the fact that they will be in special care for however long. So the landscape will just change.
Do you think it's, poignant that you wanted a community when you went to Bundaberg? You're like, I want a community. That's what I want. And the community that you found, because you said you met a lot of people online and when you're here, it's not what you set out.
No, it's not. It's not. I never.
But tell us about what that's given you.
That has given me a lot of strength. It really has. I mean, I remember when we first came to Brisbane, and I thought I was the only woman in the world that was dealing with this, and that was so wrong to think that.
Ellie, you're back.
I'm back.
You saw the doctor.
Yeah, and you just got to sit through and watch me have steroids.
I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on the journey with you right now.
Yeah. So
what happened?
Look, on Monday I was told that I had a low number of platelets, and if they go below a certain number, then they can't give you a spinal block for cesarean, because we know that I'm going to deliver the twins by cesarean. So I was told that today I would have my bloods, and with that, I would get a yay or a nay kind of an answer. I'd know if the platelets were lower than my previous reading, then I'd be delivering tomorrow, and if not, I guess we're going to do bloods again in a few days. I've just been told that I'm being booked for a cesarean tomorrow.
Oh my goodness!
Which is such a... I'm in disbelief, because it doesn't just mean that my babies will be born into the real world. I don't even think I've processed that really. It's also for me that this journey is coming to an end, and that journey we were talking about a few minutes ago is closer than I thought. So I've just had he called it a rescue steroid shot, so it's just a single shot. I was just saying to you that it hurts less if it's for me it hurts less in the thigh. And now starts the journey to tomorrow.
So have they given you a time?
No, he said that they're fully booked in theatre, but he said that's not my problem. He'll make time.
My goodness, Ellie.
So, yeah. Wow.
Lots of emotions.
So I've got to ring family and tell them, and my husband knows he's going to be driving back later.
So, Ellie, I think this is a perfect place to pause.
Yeah, I think so too.
On this journey.
I think so.
And if you're okay, I would love to continue this chat after the twins are born. Does that?
I would love that.
Oh,
I would. And I'm going to be here for a while still.
Yeah.
So I'll be around.
We will craft and we will chat more.
We will.
And share this amazing story.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Massive
Carlie.
good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you.
But you are so strong.